This week we got Blood Hunt number 5, the end of the road for the 60-issue spectacular Blood Hunt event led by Jed MacKay, featuring a host of creators that you don't know, tying into almost every major series. It turns out it wasn't a great event, but there were some interesting things that happened along the way. Maybe one of the worst things in modern Marvel Comics has happened during this event. And we did get a couple of things that I do think were exciting. And here to talk with me about this and wrap this up is our good friend Jim from Weird Science. How you doing, Jim?
Oh, lovely. Lovely. All these events, they're all worth it, I say. I
don't know about you, but I couldn't be more ready for Venom War. It felt like Blood Hunt was just like a fluffer getting me excited for Venom War now.
Yeah. Yeah, the funny thing is they have the checklist on some of the books this week, and I started counting. I'm like, will it ever end? Will it ever end? Are we ever just going to get books, just not events? It's nonsense.
It is nonsense, and really Blood Hunt from the beginning was nonsense. It seems like an event that they just conjured out of thin air. There was a tiny bit of lead up into it, but it never really made sense that you would have a 60-issue Marvel-wide crossover focusing on vampires. And I would say this thing was an enormous letdown really across the board. Hopefully people didn't buy into it and saw through the BS. But if you did buy into it, I hope you weren't too let down by the end.
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of books. I was going to say a big event, but then some people might just tune in and think I might good, but a ton of books, and it just didn't seem like there was enough story for it. And it just felt odd. It never felt like it got started from the beginning. It just nonsense. Again, I keep saying nonsense, but it just felt like, man, it should have been bigger.
So we got to the end of the road this week, and I guess there were 3 things that really came out of Blood Hunt by the end. Number 1, the biggest thing that has the most potential to be cool for Marvel Comics moving forward, Doom is Sorcerer Supreme now. He duped the Avengers, Doctor Strange specifically, into giving him that power and all that kind of stuff. Pretty cool thing there. I don't like exactly how it happened, but I do feel like that's a big event. The other thing that happened is Khonshu is no longer being held. He's been released. He's been reunited with Mark Spector, and the real Moon Knight has returned. And the last thing, which I do not get whatsoever, vampires can now walk out during the day like Blade.
Yeah, that's the craziest thing. And people who ended up wanting to have, oh my God, a Blade event. This is cool. Like, we don't get a big Blade event. And then at the end, you kind of nullify the one thing Blade can do. Odd. And by the end, not really even explaining how any of this works or even what's up with Blade at the moment. So yeah, it ended up with those. And like you said, those go down the line of, okay, that's cool. Sorcerer Supreme, Dr. Doom. And then it just kind of gets a little less Khonshu because, again, what does that really do for the book anyway? And then this thing with the vampires and Miles and Dracula just seemed odd.
It's obvious that the reason they ended the Moon Knight run and went to Vengeance of the Moon Knight was just to kill him off so they could bring him back, within 6 weeks within
yeah.
the Blood Hunt event.
Yeah. And when people end up where they get angry, and they seem not to want to get angry at Jed MacKay, but Jed MacKay killed Mark to then have a bullshit kind of mini to then himself bring him back as what should have been a big moment in Blood Hunt, but it didn't even feel big. A lot of the things that happened that were supposed to feel big in this just kind of felt like you didn't really realize until afterwards. The one thing not
the Asgardian crowbar in there. It's hard to take seriously.
Exactly. Yeah, you got Khonshu with a crowbar, but every time you're like, did that just happen or whatnot? One of the things, though, is obviously with Dr. Doom, and that was set up for a while now. You had it in the Timeless deal where they showed, hey, in the future, you'll have Dr.
Like
Doom, Sorcerer Supreme. I know. And so I had a video saying this is going to happen. People were making, there was everything pointing to it. And then you got it. But even then I thought, it's weird if you're a Doctor Strange fan, you're probably furious. But you have that play of, little, what is it? The small print that Dr. Doom, well, I told you when we saved but I haven't saved it all yet. I'm like, okay. Like you said, though, I think that could be pretty cool. Dr. Doom as Sorcerer Supreme is the cool thing. But it felt by the end that was more of the important thing than anything that happened with the vampires or Blade or anything like that. That seemed like an afterthought.
100%. And it's certainly, we know now this week, and I'm going to have a video up on it by the end of the week or maybe early next week, that this is leading up to a big Doom event, probably led by Jed MacKay for the Avengers.
Yeah, and again, if you're
An event to set up an event.
yeah, that's the thing. If you're event fatigued, one of the reasons why you would be and why I am is that events don't end. They just end up setting up the next event. It's like they don't die, they multiply, the whole deal. And it just gets annoying. And then you realize, like, why am I investing, especially something 60 issues?
But I'm all for Dr. Doom as Sorcerer Supreme. I think that's a cool idea. Don't love how they executed it, but whatever. It's in the past now. Hopefully they do something really cool with that. And that's something to get excited about. I don't think it's something to go reread Blood Hunt in a year over, but it's something to remember. And I think it's something that should do something cool in the Marvel comic book universe. Now moving over to our second big takeaway. A lot of people might have felt like Marvel's big, sin here was damaging their wallet. But really, I think the most destructive thing they did with Blood Hunt, even worse than being 60 issues and never justifying it, the implementation of interior variants via red band issues where they were having just 1 or 2 extra pages of bloody variants in there of literally scenes that don't even happen, because we know in the very first red band issue, we see Blade literally cut Sorcerer Supreme, Doctor Strange in half. And that never actually happened, because you see him in the very first page of Doctor Strange, also written by Jed McKay, and he's not cut in half, but they got to charge people an extra $6 to buy the exact same comic book with a page that didn't even actually happen in real life.
Yeah, that's the worst part of it. You end up being told, oh my God, you got to get this huge thing, this big thing that happened. And with that, the cutting Doctor Strange in half in that first issue was kind of the biggest thing, but then you're told during that week, oh, that doesn't matter. That really didn't happen. So why would you get it? Why would you end up? But they say it after the fact, after people have bought it. And then you get a couple more scenes, but nothing that's going to shock anybody, nothing that's going to wow. And it didn't matter, because it's like a what if. What if I spent too much money on a bunch of bullshit is what it ends up being in my mind. But the idea, it's despicable almost that they're going to push these.
Well, and they are going to push it because it was relatively successful by the metrics that I've seen. They at least moved, and they got people to pay for the exact same comic book twice and pay an extra $1 for it. And now we're going to get interior variants, at least for a few years. And I'll be honest, even if they start not working and not being popular and people don't invest in them, which people aren't really doing a whole lot of that with variant covers right now, they'll just continue doing it. This is the Pandora's box that comic book readers and retailers and collectors are going to wish in 5 years had never happened, but will only be able to blame themselves for buying into it.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And they keep coming up, and these are gimmicks. I mean, you end up having QR codes, you end up having these interior variants, and it doesn't end up doing the one thing that they need to do, is make the issues better, make the events bigger and better. They end up just being gimmicks just to, have a stat sheet at the end to hand to the bean counters that they can go, okay, you doubled up with these. That's cool. Keep doing it. It doesn't make anything better, though. And that's the worst part.
Yeah, they're basically trying to cover up the symptom rather than treat it.
Yep. Yeah, 100%.
Is what's going on here. So interior variants, red band, Blood Hunt, this is going to be, patient zero in something that is going to have a lot of people very, very furious, within 5 years. And it's going to continue going on. I think this is an enormously terrible idea for comic books, and something that will be zero value add within a few years. So that was the really bad thing, at least in my mind, that happened in Blood Hunt. Another big takeaway, there were a ton of tie-ins to this thing, and they certainly tied into your Fantastic Four, Doctor Strange, Avengers. They tied into a lot of different books within Marvel Comics, but the extra miniseries were even worse. We got Justina Ireland, I think, with her first major work at Marvel with ASM Blood Hunt, absolute unreadable trash. Yeah. Cheryl Lynn Eaton getting one of her first big breaks at Marvel Comics with her, was it Black Panther, Blood Hunt, Panther, absolute unreadable trash.
Yep.
And there were just so many bad writers getting breaks in here, adding nothing to the story, just creating more unsellable crap that's going to remind people that Marvel Comics are not what they used to be, and they don't have good writers. And there were so many of them. They were so bad.
And when you ended up where you have this event, right, and you have all these times, and I sat there, okay, which ones would be the ones that are most important? You know, you have Jed McKay doing Avengers and Doctor Strange. I'm thinking those should be, they weren't. You end up having like a Wolverine, which I think was pretty good, but you end up, it was hard to even figure out which were the biggest ones, and even the ones that were big, like Black Panther was kind of big, or Strange Academy, or
I think
the
Dracula was
one.
supposed to be
Yeah,
big
the
too,
Dracula one. But they never really told you, because if they tell you that, then you're only going to get that. But in the meantime, they put bullshit writers on them, so people aren't going to read those. And yet the main event did not cover enough itself to be actually satisfying either. And so I ended up where I didn't know which way to turn of where to go with things. But again, I'm not going to read a shitty book just because you tell me it's big when it's shitty. And I did read all of them. And a lot of them weren't worth reading. And some of them, the big ones, weren't worth reading. You got to put better writers on an event. If you're going to have 60 plus issues, you need to get some writers that people will be like, oh my God, I got to read that. Mainly because of the writer knowing that it'll be good. But these were a lot of sus writers, a lot of mid and, you know, lower than mid writers that nobody would ever touch.
Yeah, the Dracula Blood Hunt book, you know, in the end, technically plays a large part in the finality of it. What happens to Blade?
Mm-hmm.
Written by Danny Lore, supposedly important events that are going on in there that you need to be aware of to really have a satisfying conclusion. Nobody that has half a sense on what a good comic book writer is and what Danny Lore is capable of, we're going to buy that book and read it.
No.
And obviously you just ended up missing a bunch of stuff, but you also didn't have to read Danny Lore, so it ended up being worth it. But yeah. the big events in the end don't hit as hard.
No, they don't at all. And it used to be like main books in the event should be the, you know, the foundation. And then you kind of get a little bit more of the color and flavor in the times. If you like that character, if you like that writer, and they don't do that anymore. And this didn't do it because I don't think anything had any flavor whatsoever. And it just felt like a little story that got expanded. They didn't have the wherewithal to get good writers and just grabbed whoever they could. People just not doing anything, not working at the moment. And again, you don't make me confident that you care or want to give a good event if you have these type of writers on the tie-ins. And so I think a lot of people just kind of bailed on it.
Absolutely. Now, our fourth big takeaway is a positive. You mentioned this very briefly earlier. Wolverine Blood Hunt from Tom Waltz and Juan Jose Reed was really good. Was it good because it was a Blood Hunt book and it was vital to the events in Blood Hunt? Not at all. Not at all. But it's a fun Wolverine book. It was kind of tying into some of the more exciting things that Ben Percy was doing on Wolverine, you know, in the first year or two when he had come on board, you know, and that was good. It would have been a fine Wolverine book, though. It didn't even need to be a Wolverine Blood Hunt.
No, and that's like actually why it was good. I mean, the idea that you ended up having them go in and Waltz ended up saying, okay, you know, I don't know what the info they were given anyway, but he thought, okay, I'm going to just do established stuff and just kind of continue the run that just ended, the Ben Percy run, and just tie it into some vampire stuff. It didn't end up meaning anything, but it had a beginning, middle, end, and it was satisfying. It looked good. It was the best one. It was the best tie-in in the whole deal, which is kind of sad because it didn't have any connection really to the event. It was just kind of a cool Wolverine book, but that's why I liked it.
Yeah, because you got to have a Wolverine tie-in to the event.
Yeah. I mean, and you can't have them do anything that big. So you have, I mean, here's the thing. When you go and look at the tie-ins and the whole event as a whole, you didn't even have Spider-Man, Peter Parker Spider-Man, actually mean anything in this either, which felt weird by the end. I mean, you end up tying up the event and Peter Parker, he's off doing nonsense with a goblin nonsense with this kind of startup business stuff and not even being involved in the main thing. I just didn't get it.
Why isn't Tom Waltz writing this new Wolverine book instead of Saladin Ahmed? Tom Waltz knocked it out of the park. When's the last time Saladin Ahmed knocked anything, you know, for a ball
out of the infield? Out of the park?
Yeah.
I'm telling you, check swing,
foul
ball.
When's the last time he made contact?
It's been a while. He's under the Mendoza line, I would believe, send him to the minors. But yeah, I mean, you would have thought that Tom Waltz was given this book as almost like a trial. Hey, let's see what he has. But they had already decided to go with the, you know, Saladin Ahmed coming up. I thought, Yeah, that's a big mistake, because I think everybody that I've talked to at least thought that Wolverine was the best book, and it makes it kind of elevate, because in a 60 plus issue event, it was the one thing that was a shining, point of it, which makes it even better. So yeah, they should have maybe had him going forward on a Wolverine book.
The other story that almost stood out as kind of good, or at least it was good for two of the tie-ins, and then I think on the third one it just kind of lost it, I guess, was Avengers. From
Yeah.
Jed McKay, where you had Steve Rogers and a bunch of, well, I guess they weren't all like Z-listers, but I think
it was
Hercules
fun.
there.
Yeah,
But it was a fun book for 2 issues, and then the third one you're like, why isn't this over yet?
I know. And again, though, when it ended with that third issue, I ended up getting cut because I liked it. I actually thought it was fun. The first 2 issues, like you said, were really fun. And then I start thinking, okay, why am I liking this Jed McKay tie-in that means nothing? Because it really meant nothing. Why am I liking it more than the main book? Why am I liking it more than the whole event? And I think that Jed McKay is more of a fun kind of writer like that, but yet he's convinced himself he has to be big, epic, and cosmic, or whatever the case may be. I think that the Moon Knight stuff may have gotten to him, because when he just kind of has fun, I had a lot of fun.
Well, I disagree, because I think he was trying to have fun in Taskmaster, and that might be
Well, that was too much fun. Like, that was his own fun. But the Black Cat stuff I really liked. I really liked that before all of this nonsense. But yeah, people talk about that Taskmaster. They seem to look at it with rose-colored glasses right now. I'm like, you got to go back and read that. That was bad. It was really bad. It was that was like non-edited fun. You need to pull him back a little. But I thought the Avengers book was fun. I thought that he was kind of just like letting loose with that as well. Just like, hey, I'm going to have some fun. We're going to get Cap. We'll have some cool things. But then the
Fighting Bear and Blood, it works. It's always has.
It does. It worked very good, especially, like we said, the first 2 issues. And having that Z-list kind of deal, like you said, not quite Z-list, but it was fun, because you don't usually get those type of, and it made sense why it was, and it was good. I had fun with it, but yeah, not many of the other tie-ins were memorable whatsoever.
For my money, I would say 6 out of the 60 issues were worth reading. The 4 issues of Wolverine Blood Hunt and the first 2 issues of those Avengers tie-ins. Otherwise, maybe not so much, and I think that's really the big issue. And the final takeaway: far too big, far too boring. Not enough stuff happening. He introduces the Blood Coven, which is supposed to be like a big thing, and they got all these stupid names and
nobody
these
remembers
character designs that the book was so dark you couldn't even decipher them from each other when they were in battle. Yeah, they weren't big by the end. It was like, why are they fighting still? They already kicked their asses.
Yeah, it was back and forth, and then at the end they ran. And I want to ask anybody, I almost dare them to tell me what the Weird's power was, or what the Cruel ended up you didn't know. And those
was his name Weird, or was it unusual?
Unusual. And that's the thing too. You have Cruel and unusual. You have ready made, like, oh no, we're getting cruel and unusual punishment, like some stupid. I thought it was set up for that. They didn't even do that. But in the meantime, those are part of the main villains, and you end up in Varney. All these things just fell flat. Nobody cared. You didn't really get.
What was the name of the temple that he dropped in New York?
Oh, the Temple of the First Blasphemy. Oh. Like, again, they
stop making up names.
It's like 10-cent names for 1-cent issues, and you never know what happened or why this was. It just ended up dropping on New York City, and that was it. It's like the name's supposed to wow you with the Blood Coven. Nobody knows them, and then they leave. And Varney, you never really set it up. And so at the end, that's why I said,
don't know.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I forget who. Smoke Eater didn't, thank God. I was worried about that. But you end up, by the end, because nothing really hit or was set up in the main story, that's why the Doctor Strange and the Doctor Doom, that's the big thing. And so at the end, I thought, okay, they just had a checklist. Jed McKay was given a checklist. This, and this has to happen. And just kind of meander to that, and don't really care about setting things up. Don't care about investing or anything in character work or characters themselves. Just get to that point, because at the end, I kind of threw up my hands at some of the things, saying, I guess that happened. I don't know.
Well, I think maybe Miles Morales is still a vampire.
Yeah, he
seems
if he can
go around during the day, who cares?
That's the thing. He is there, and basically the only thing is he's got like a new dental plan. And he's got sharp teeth. I don't get it. I don't get why and how. And at the end, you're just making a blade event to take away his one thing. And then he's bleeding out. I don't know. At the end, I thought at one point I thought Varney was dead, but he isn't, because if he was dead, then Miles wouldn't be a deal. And even then, you end up defeating the main villain with this weird little, you know what I mean? Like you end up where all this time,
I don't even understand why Bloodline was the only one that could defeat Varney. It was never explained.
It was never explained.
The only one that could do it.
Yep.
But then she tries to do it. He's like, I've had the body too long.
I'm not your bloodline.
Force me out. You need another child. And Miles is like, you're my daddy too. And he pushes it further. And I think it's supposed to be like a Return of the King. Oh, not Return of the King, but the I'm No Man moment from Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Yeah, exactly.
It's supposed to be that, but it's so dumb. You're like,
it's so dumb.
Fuck out of
and
here,
the
man.
whole time you're sitting there thinking, and I don't know that anybody who likes Bloodline, I don't think Brielle is anybody's.
Nobody knows who that
right?
is.
I know. So when we're told she's the be all end all. Oh my God, she's the big thing. You're like, all right, like I don't really love that, but hey, let's go with it. And then at the end, you're like, oh no. You weren't the big thing. Only then a panel later, you don't even get to actually like settle in. And Miles comes out, you turned me, so you're my daddy. And you end up, it's like a episode of Maury, who's the daddy. And then, so I'm like, okay, Varney's dead. And then Miles isn't a vampire anymore, or nobody would be. It's one of the first vampires, but he's not dead. He's put in a prison of a prism by Scarlet Witch. But even that, like, never was really explained. I'm like, this is the big thing, and you're not even telling us really what happened. And then you just end up, like you said, like vampires and Dracula's like, looks like we can daywalk now. I think I'll go to the beach. And Miles is like, what does this mean? I'm like, I want to know too. Because
there's a great page at the end that really summed up how I felt about the event, where you had like all the Avengers standing like and looking off into the thing, and then there's like Vision like in a fucking hospital gurney. I was just like, this looks so stupid.
It did. It was so ridiculous. Even then, at the one point, you end up like the Blood Covenant. You ended up having Moon Knight, who again was supposed to be a big thing coming back, but I didn't feel like it felt big in the thing because we knew he'd come back, and then you kind of call bullshit. But when he comes back, Khonshu's there. And they fight kind of off panel. And all you end up having Vision when he said, I don't have the solar energy. And then later they're just holding him. Like, what is going on here? And even then, when you had the battles constantly through back and forth, Blood Covenant Avengers, you never really could tell what was really happening because you don't even know the powers of the Blood Covenant. They're just yelling stuff. I just like that Tony has a crash cart in his suit. I wasn't aware of that. I didn't even know what that meant. I'm a dummy. I didn't know what that even meant. And then somebody told me, I'm like, I thought it was just like he'd shoot a bunch of pills or something out of his hands. I don't know. The whole thing was ridiculous.
It was. So in some retrospects, Jim, you could say, Blood Hunt, it's not Secret Empire. It's not destructive to a character or anything like that. And, it did have Doom as Sorcerer Supreme. That's cool stuff. But I do think in the end, while this might not be as bad storytelling as maybe, a Secret Empire or an Iron Man 2020 or some of the really bad stuff that we've had lately, I think in the end, this event will be far more destructive than any of those. The Secret Empire really only destroys, Steve Rogers' Captain America, which is enormously stupid. Interior variants, I think, could destroy everything. And I think that will be forever associated with that event. And I think Blood Hunt, because of that, will be tainted forever.
Yeah. And again, you're talking about, rolling in a character that can be fixed and whatnot. But when you start messing around with the company-wide stuff, and that could end up just being something that just turns so many people off. You can skip an event, but if they keep doing these crazy, red band thing, and the Blade book that's coming out is full out red band. I think that just that, not even the interior variant, it's just red band itself. It's a gimmick. What are they going to get Kiss to come in and have their blood in the comic? I mean, it's just gimmicks, and they have to make things better. And again, I think that when we say about the idea that it doesn't ruin anything, I think maybe Blade and Doctor Strange fans might differ, but it doesn't ruin them completely. And like you said, I agree. The
kind of ruins
Dr.
vampires.
Doom, Yeah, I didn't know. I just thought that the whole play that they ran into a brick wall, like they didn't figure out the end, because if you do kill the villain, he's kind of the first vampire. All the vampires then are cured, but instead, I don't even know what happened to the people around the world with it. I have no idea. It just ends, and they're like, oh, well, and it's the idea that Dr. Doom becomes Sorcerer Supreme, and then that becomes the marquee item, and they're like, oh, right, this is great, but I don't know what's going on with the rest of the characters. But yeah, vampires are in trouble. And they can walk during the day, though. They're day walkers. They'll be cool.
If you would like to hear Jim and I talking about all the comic books this week, everything from Marvel, DC, and indie comic books, you do need to go check us out on Think Critical Patreon if you like what we're doing here on YouTube. And if you want to support our mission, you go there. You support us on the Patreon, you get awesome podcasts like the Hot or Not Comic Book Rundown with Jim, where we cover everything. Hope to see you there. There's a link in the video description.